My children erased me from their weddings. So I erased them from the multi-million-dollar company they thought was their inheritance. They called it a family business. But they forgot one crucial detail. I was the only family who ever showed up to build it. This isn't just a story about revenge. It's about the devastating quiet that follows a betrayal you never saw coming, and the earth-shattering roar you make when you finally decide you will never be silent again. If you've ever felt invisible to the people who were supposed to see you most clearly, then you know the fire I'm talking about. Stick with me, and I'll tell you how I turned that fire into a forge. And before we dive in, if this story resonates with you, do me a favor. Hit that like button and subscribe. It tells the algorithm that stories of strength are worth sharing. Now, let's go back to the beginning. Part 1. The setup and injustice. It's strange, the things that haunt you. It's not the grand betrayals that keep me up at night. Not anymore. It's the little details. The way the sunlight caught the lace on my daughter Sophie's wedding dress in a photo I was never meant to see. The perfect, joyful smile on her face, turned towards a man I'd met only twice, with her father, my ex-husband, David, standing proudly by her side. In the picture, there's an empty space where a mother should be, an invisible void. That's what I had become, a ghost at my own family's feast. But before the ghost, there was the woman, 43 years old, and I feel like I've lived 3 lifetimes. The first one belonged to David. I was 19 when I met him, naive and convinced that his brand of chaotic charm was passion. He was a whirlwind, all grand promises and reckless energy. I was the quiet, steady girl he said grounded him. We had Sophie, then Michael 2 years later, and for a while I tried to build a home inside his hurricane. But hurricanes don't build things, they only know how to break them. David's work was always vague and on the road. He was a salesman, a consultant, a whatever paid the bills this month kind of guy. He was gone more than he was home. And when he was home, the whirlwind became a storm. The smell of whiskey on his breath was a permanent fixture, a sour perfume that clung to our curtains and our carpets. His words, once charming, sharpened into cruel little daggers. He'd mock the dinner I'd cooked, belittle the way I was raising the kids, or just ignore us entirely, lost in the blue glow of the television. I remember one night with chilling clarity. Michael was 5. He had spent all afternoon drawing a picture of our family, a wobbly crayon masterpiece with a stick figure dad, a stick figure mom, and 2 smaller stick figures holding hands under a giant, smiling sun. He was so proud. He ran to show David the moment he walked in the door. David, reeking of cheap beer, glanced down at the paper, scoffed, and said, "What is this garbage? You can't even draw a straight line, kid." He crumpled it up and tossed it on the floor. I watched the light in my son's eyes die. It didn't just flicker, it was extinguished. That was the night I knew. I wasn't just staying for the kids. I was teaching them that this was what love looked like, that this was what they deserved. So I left. There was no dramatic fight, no screaming match, just a quiet packing of bags while he was passed out on the sofa. I loaded Sophie and Michael, both sleepy and confused, into my beat-up 1998 sedan. The engine coughed to life like an old man waking from a nap. As I pulled away from the curb, I looked at our little rented house, a place that had held more tears than laughter, and I made a promise to the 2 small faces in my rearview mirror. I promised them a life where they would feel safe and cherished and seen. I had no money, no plan, and no family to call for help. All I had was that promise. The next few years are a blur of exhaustion. I worked 2, sometimes 3 jobs. From 6 a.m. to 2 p.m., I was Laura the house cleaner, my hands raw from bleach and ammonia, scrubbing the cavernous, empty homes of people who had everything. The smell of lemon polish and old money still makes my stomach clench. Then I'd race to pick up the kids from school, make them dinner, help with homework, and put them to bed. At 9 p.m., I became Laura the diner waitress. I'd work the night shift until 3 a.m., fueled by stale coffee and the desperate need to make rent. I'd come home to our tiny, cramped apartment, the sound of sirens in the distance a constant lullaby, and I'd fall into bed for a few precious hours before the alarm screamed me awake to do it all over again. In the slivers of time in between, on my half-hour lunch break on the bus after the kids were asleep, I took online business courses at the local community college. I learned about accounting, marketing, logistics. It felt like I was trying to build a skyscraper with a handful of toothpicks, but every course I passed was another toothpick in my arsenal. My best friend, Maria, was my angel. She'd watch the kids for free when I had a late class or an extra shift, never once making me feel like a burden. "You're building an empire, Laura," she'd say, handing me a thermos of hot coffee. Empires aren't built in a day. The idea for the printing shop came from a throwaway comment my diner manager made. "We pay a fortune for our menus," he grumbled one night, "and they always come back with typos." A light bulb went off. I'd always been good with design, meticulous with details. I spent 6 months researching, saving every spare dollar. I sold my grandfather's old watch, the only thing of value I owned. I took out a small, high-interest loan that felt like signing my life away. And with that, I bought one ancient, hulking offset printing press and rented a tiny, windowless space in a rundown industrial park. Carter Print Solutions was born. In the beginning, it was just me. Me, the clanking rhythm of the old press I nicknamed Bessie, and my children. Sophie and Michael would do their homework at a rickety card table in the back, the air thick with the metallic, inky smell of production. They'd play with stacks of scrap paper, drawing their own crayon masterpieces. And this time, no one was there to crumple them. I was there. For every school play, every soccer game, every scraped knee. I was the one who held them when they had nightmares, the one who helped them with their college applications, the one who celebrated every small victory. David was a ghost, a name on a birthday card with a $20 bill tucked inside, if we were lucky. He'd resurfaced a few years after I left, with a new wife and a story he'd spun about how I'd run off and kept the kids from him. It was a lie, a convenient fiction that absolved him of his absence and his cruelty. I was too busy building a life to fight it. I figured my actions, my constant presence, would speak louder than his empty words. And the business grew. My God, it grew. That first diner menu led to flyers for a local real estate agent, that led to brochures for a small hotel. I reinvested every penny. I bought a second machine, then a third. I hired my first employee, a young man named Ben, who was as passionate about paper stock as I was. We moved out of the cramped back room and into a real office. Carter Print Solutions became a name people in our region knew. It stood for quality, for reliability. It stood for me. It was my blood, my sweat, my 3 a.m. panic attacks, my 6 a.m. triumphs. I always told myself I was doing it for them, for Sophie and Michael. I was building a legacy they could be proud of, a foundation they could build their own lives upon that I paid for Sophie's college every single semester. I bought Michael his first car. I co-signed on their first apartments. I never wanted them to know the struggle I had. I wanted to be their soft place to land. And I thought I was. I really did. Sophie met her fiancé, a perfectly nice, if bland, young man from a wealthy family, in her senior year of college. I was thrilled for her. When she got engaged, I imagined us spending weekends looking at wedding venues, tasting cakes, picking out flowers. I had been saving for this day since she was born. The call to meet for lunch came on a Tuesday. It was a trendy, sun-drenched cafe she liked. I got there first, my mind buzzing with ideas. I'd already made a Pinterest board. She arrived a few minutes later, looking beautiful and nervous. She picked at her kale salad, pushing a piece of avocado around her plate with her fork, avoiding my eyes. The air grew thick with unspoken words. The cheerful chatter of the cafe faded into a dull roar in my ears. "Honey, is everything okay?" I finally asked, my voice gentle. She took a shaky breath and finally looked at me. Her eyes were full of something I couldn't quite place. Pity? Guilt? "Mom," she started, her voice barely a whisper. James and we've been talking with Dad. And his family. The mention of David was like a cold stone dropping into my stomach. He and his new, wealthy wife had been playing a larger and larger role in the kids' lives since they'd gone to college. He'd swoop in, take them to fancy dinners, buy them expensive gifts, playing the part of the magnanimous father I'd never allowed him to be. I was the one who set boundaries. He was the one who broke them with a shiny new toy. Okay, I said slowly, bracing myself. It's just his family can be a little traditional, she continued, the words tumbling out in a rush. And with you and Dad, well, there's history. There's drama. Drama? My mind reeled. I am the absence of drama. I am the steady hand, the paid bills, the one who showed up. She finally spit out. We decided it would be better if you didn't come to the wedding. The fork in my hand clattered onto my plate. The sound was deafening in the sudden silence that enveloped our table. I stared at her, certain I had misheard. This had to be a cruel joke. My own daughter, my Sophie, the little girl whose tears I had dried 1,000 times, was sitting across from me in a cafe I was paying for and disinviting me from her wedding. What? I managed to choke out. We just don't want any tension on our big day, she said, her voice pleading now. It's not about you, Mom. It's about having a smooth, happy day. Dad is paying for a big part of it, and it's just easier this way. Easier. The word hung in the air, a poison dart. Easier to erase the woman who gave her life, who sacrificed everything, than to stand up to the man who gave her nothing but pain. Easier to appease his new money than to honor her own history. I felt the blood drain from my face. I could feel the eyes of other patrons on us, a hot flush of shame prickling my skin. I wanted to scream. I wanted to flip the table over. I wanted to grab her by the shoulders and shake her, to shout, "Do you have any idea what I've done for you? Do you remember who was there when he wasn't?" But I didn't. I just sat there, frozen. A statue of a mother carved from shock and heartbreak. She saw the look on my face and started backpedaling. We can do a separate dinner, Mom. Just us. To celebrate. It'll be our special thing. A consolation prize. A participation trophy for motherhood. I numbly reached for my wallet, pulled out a $100 bill and laid it on the table. For your lunch, I said, my voice flat, hollow. And for the wedding gift I won't be bringing. I stood up, my legs trembling, and walked out of that cafe without looking back. I made it to my car before the first sob escaped. It was a ragged, guttural sound that seemed to be clawed up from the very depths of my soul. I sat in my car in the middle of a busy city on a bright Tuesday afternoon, and I wept until I had nothing left. For weeks, I held on to a sliver of hope. I told myself it was a mistake, a temporary madness induced by wedding stress and her father's manipulations. She would call. She would apologize. She would say, "Of course I want my mom at my wedding." The call never came. Instead, 3 weeks later, my friend Maria sent me a text. "Laura, don't look. Please." But I had to. I opened Instagram and there it was. A professional photo, tagged with a dozen gushing hashtags. Hashtag happily ever after, hashtag best day ever, hashtag Carter wedding. It was Sophie, radiant in an impossibly expensive gown, her face glowing with joy. Her new husband was kissing her forehead, and standing beside her, one hand placed proprietorially on her shoulder, was David, smiling, beaming as if he had been Father of the Year. His new wife stood next to him, preening for the camera. I scrolled through the album, my thumb moving with a morbid, mechanical will of its own. Picture after picture of smiling faces, of dancing, of champagne toasts. A whole life, a whole celebration, happening without me. There wasn't a single chair left empty for me. I hadn't just been uninvited. I had been completely and utterly erased. And as I sat there, the blue light of my phone illuminating the tears streaming down my face, I knew this wasn't just about a wedding. This was a choice. My children were choosing his fiction over my truth. And a year later, when my son Michael got engaged, I got the phone call that confirmed it was a choice they were prepared to make again. Part 2. The Struggle and the Escalation. The year between Sophie's wedding and Michael's engagement was the longest of my life. I threw myself into my work with a ferocity that bordered on obsession. Carter Print Solutions became my sanctuary and my battlefield. Every new client landed, every production quota exceeded, was a small, silent scream into the void. It was proof that I existed, that I could build something strong and lasting, even as the foundations of my own family crumbled into dust. I tried to maintain a fragile truce with Sophie. We exchanged stilted, superficial texts. How are you? Fine. You? Good. Work is busy. They were the kind of conversations you have with a distant acquaintance, not the daughter you once knew better than your own heartbeat. She never acknowledged the gaping wound she had left behind. She never apologized. She posted endlessly about her wonderful new life, her perfect husband, and her amazing, supportive family, always with photos featuring David and his wife. It was a masterclass in revisionist history, played out in glossy Instagram squares. Each post was a fresh twist of the knife. I'd see them on vacation in Italy, a trip David paid for. And I'd remember the summer I saved for a year, just to take them to a cabin by the lake for a single week. I'd see her showing off a designer handbag, a gift from David's wife, and I'd remember the knockoff purse I'd bought her for her 16th birthday, how she'd hug me and said it was the best thing she'd ever owned. The memories, once my most cherished possessions, now felt tainted, like currency from a country that no longer existed. I was grieving a relationship that hadn't died, but had chosen to leave me. It was a profound, disorienting loneliness. The world saw me as a success story, Laura Carter, the powerhouse entrepreneur. But at night, in the quiet of my too-big house, I was just a mother whose children had decided she was an inconvenience. Then came the call from Michael. He was always the quieter of the two, more introspective. I had held on to a foolish hope that he was different, that he saw the truth. His voice on the phone was cheerful, and for a moment my heart soared. "Hey, Mom, got some big news." "Oh, yeah? What is it, sweetie?" I asked, my voice warm with an optimism I hadn't felt in a year. "Ashley and I are getting married." A wave of emotions crashed over me. Joy, fear, a desperate, pleading hope. "Michael, that's wonderful. I'm so happy for you both. When's the date? We have to start planning. Is there anything I can do to help?" The line went quiet for a beat too long, and in that silence I knew. The bottom dropped out of my stomach, a familiar, sickening plunge. "Well, that's kind of what I'm calling about," he said, his tone shifting from joyful to rehearsed. "We're keeping it really small. Super intimate. You know, just immediate family." "I'm your immediate family, Michael," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "Yeah, I know, Mom, but look, Dad's side is doing a lot for us. Ashley's family is flying in. It's just getting complicated. We decided it would be simplest to just have Dad's side of the family there." There it was again. That word. Complicated. And that other word. Simplest. My entire existence, my history, my sacrifice, reduced to a complication that needed to be simplified. Erased. This time I didn't feel shock. I felt a cold, hard rage crystallize in my chest. "So let me get this straight," I said, my voice low and even, devoid of the tears I shed for Sophie. "The man who crumpled up your childhood drawings, who was never there for single parent-teacher conference, who you didn't see for nearly a decade, his side of the family is the one you're choosing?" "Mom, don't do this," he sighed, a sound of pure annoyance. "It's not like that. Dad's really stepped up. He's changed. He's helping us with a down payment on a house. He's trying to make things right." Make things right? The audacity of it stole my breath. David wasn't making things right. He was buying them. He was purchasing their loyalty with checks and vacations, rewriting the past with a fat wallet. And my children, the two people I had shielded and provided for, were selling their memories to the highest bidder. "I see," I said. The words felt like ice chips in my mouth. "I paid for your college, Michael. I bought the car you drove to meet your fiancé in. I kept a roof over your head and food on your table every single day of your childhood when your father was a ghost. But he offers you a down payment, and suddenly I'm the one who gets cut from the guest list. It's not a transaction, Mom, he said, his voice rising in frustration, the classic retort of someone who knows, deep down, that it is exactly a transaction. This is our wedding day. It's supposed to be about us, not your old baggage with Dad. My old baggage. That's what it was to them now. The years of struggle, the sacrifices, the lonely nights, it was just my baggage. Something I was expected to check at the door so they could have their perfect, simple day, sponsored by their newly redeemed father. You're right, Michael, I said, and the coldness in my own voice surprised me. It is your day. You have a wonderful, simple, uncomplicated wedding. And I hung up the phone. I didn't cry this time. The rage was too pure, too hot. It burned away the tears. I walked through my house, the house I had bought with cash from a bonus I'd earned after landing our biggest contract to date. I looked at the photos on the mantel. Me with a tiny Sophie on my hip. Me teaching a young Michael to ride his bike. A whole history of us that they had now declared null and void. A few days later, a mutual acquaintance, someone who didn't know the situation, cornered me at a charity event. Oh, Laura, she gushed. I ran into your ex-husband, David, the other day. He was telling me all about the kids' weddings. He's so proud. He said it was such a shame you became so obsessed with your company that you drifted away from them. But he was so glad he could step in and be the stable parent they needed. I just stood there, a glass of champagne in my hand, my smile frozen on my face. The room tilted. He hadn't just poisoned my children against me. He was rewriting my story to the entire world. In his version, I wasn't the savior, I was the villain. The workaholic mother who abandoned her family for ambition. And he, the prodigal father, was the hero who swooped in to save them. That was the moment something inside me broke. Or maybe it was the moment something was forged. The grief, the hurt, the shock, they all burned away, leaving behind something hard and sharp and diamond strong. I had spent my life building things for them. A home, a life, a company, a legacy. And they had taken it all, spat on it, and handed the credit to the man who had tried to tear it all down. That night I didn't sleep. I sat in my office on the top floor of the Carter Print Solutions building, a glass of expensive scotch in my hand, a luxury I had earned 1,000 times over. I looked out at the city lights, the sprawling testament to a world that kept moving, with or without me. For a long time, I stared at the company logo glowing softly on the wall, a stylized C and P intertwined, my initials, my life's work. They had called it the family company in passing, a place they assumed they'd work one day or inherit, an asset, a given. They saw it as their birthright. They never saw the woman who bled for it. They never saw the nights I slept on the floor of the office to oversee a rush job. They never saw the terror in my eyes when I signed for a loan that could have bankrupted me. They saw the result, not the sacrifice, just like they saw David's money, not his history of neglect. I took a slow sip of the scotch, the fiery liquid a balm to my frozen soul. They wanted to erase me from their milestones? Fine. They wanted to pretend I was just baggage? Fine. They wanted to align themselves with their father, the man of smoke and mirrors? Fine. A new thought began to form in my mind. It wasn't a flash of inspiration. It was a slow, cold sunrise, a dawning realization of my own power. They had made their choice. They had defined what family meant to them. Now, it was my turn to define what my legacy meant to me. And as I looked out at the city I had, in many ways, conquered on my own, I realized my legacy had absolutely nothing to do with them anymore. The plan hadn't formed yet, but the foundation was laid, and it was built on the rubble of the family I thought I had. Part 3. The turning point and the planning. The night I hung up on Michael was the end of something, but the night I heard how David was rewriting our history, that was the beginning. The shift inside me was seismic. The hurt didn't vanish, but it was no longer the pilot. It was just fuel. And for the first time in years, I felt my hands firmly on the steering wheel of my own life, ready to drive it in a direction of my own choosing. I stopped trying. I stopped sending the polite, hopeful texts. I stopped checking their social media. I enacted a quiet, personal embargo on the two people I had given everything to. It was a strange kind of freedom, cutting those ties. The daily ache of hope was replaced by the clean, sharp edge of purpose. My purpose became Carter Print Solutions. It had always been my passion, but now it became my obsession in the best possible way. I wasn't just the CEO anymore. I was a visionary. I channeled every ounce of my pain, rage, and resilience into that company. We weren't just a regional printing house anymore. I pushed us into new territories with a hunger I hadn't felt since those early days in the diner. We expanded into high-end, eco-friendly packaging, securing contracts with artisanal food and cosmetic brands who loved our story, a woman-owned business built from scratch. I invested heavily in digital integration, creating a seamless online portal for corporate clients that tripled our efficiency. I hired the best and brightest, paying them so well and treating them with such respect that our employee turnover was practically zero. Ben, my very first hire, was now my chief operating officer, a brilliant, loyal man who understood the soul of the company because he had helped me build it. During this time, about 2 years after Michael's wedding, my children would occasionally surface, usually with a text that read like an automated reminder. "Hey Mom, my car insurance is due. Can you help out?" from Michael. Or, "James and I are thinking of buying a new sofa. Do you still have that store discount?" from Sophie. My replies were always the same. Polite, brief, and unwavering. "No, I'm sorry, I can't help with that." The first time, Sophie replied with a series of question marks. The second time, Michael sent a passive-aggressive, "Wow, okay. Guess things are tight over there." They had no idea. Carter Print Solutions wasn't tight. It was soaring. We were landing national accounts. Our revenue had quadrupled in 5 years. I was making more money than I had ever dreamed possible. But I had come to a crucial realization. My money, my resources, my support, they were not an entitlement. They were an extension of my love and loyalty. And since they had rejected the source, they had forfeited the access. It was as simple as that. The idea to sell the company didn't come from a place of defeat, but of ultimate victory. It started as a whisper. An investment firm, Viridian Capital, had been quietly courting me for months. At first, I ignored their overtures. Sell my baby? The company that was my armor and my identity? It felt like a betrayal of myself. The woman from Viridian, Eleanor Vance, was persistent. She wasn't a corporate shark. She was sharp, empathetic, and had done her homework. She didn't just talk numbers. She talked about my journey. "What you've built here, Laura, is extraordinary," she said during one of our lunches. She was in her late 50s with a calm, commanding presence. "It's not just a profitable enterprise. It's a story. And stories have immense value." We started talking more seriously. Eleanor laid out a vision, not of me losing my company, but of me capitalizing on my life's work in a way that would secure my future beyond any doubt. It would give me the one thing I had never truly had, absolute untethered freedom. The thought lingered in my mind. What was I holding on to it for? For children who saw it as their ATM, not their mother's soul poured into paper and ink? The idea of a clean break, of a final, triumphant chapter that was mine and mine alone, began to take root. This was when the plan began to truly form. It wasn't just about selling the company. It was about how I would do it. It would be a celebration, not a quiet signing in a sterile boardroom, but a gala, a grand, unapologetic spectacle of my success, surrounded by the people who had actually been there. The ones who saw me, supported me, and cheered for me when no one else did. The negotiations with Viridian took nearly a year. It was a grueling process of due diligence of lawyers and accountants crawling through every invoice and contract I'd ever signed. Through it all, Eleanor was my confidant. One evening, working late in my office over takeout containers of Chinese food, she asked a question. "You've never mentioned your kids in all this, Laura. Do they have a role in the company?" I looked at her, and for the first time, I told someone the whole story. The house cleaning, the diner, David's cruelty, the weddings. All of it. I laid the pieces of my broken heart out on the polished mahogany of my boardroom table. She listened without interruption, her expression unreadable. When I finished, she was silent for a long moment. Then she looked me straight in the eye and said, "Good for you. Build your own damn table, and only give seats to the people who deserve to be there." That was all the validation I needed. The deal we finalized was staggering. A number with so many zeros it looked like a typo. It would set me up for life and the lives of anyone I chose to share it with. The final part of the deal was that the official signing and announcement would happen at a time and place of my choosing. The planning of the gala became my secret, joyful project. I hired the best event planner in the city. We booked the grand ballroom at the historic St. Regis Hotel, a place with crystal chandeliers that dripped from the ceiling like frozen waterfalls and floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the entire city. Then came the guest list. This was the most important part. It was my testament, my final word on what family truly meant. First on the list was my best friend Maria, the woman who had babysat my kids for free, who had shown up with coffee at 5 a.m. when I was on the verge of collapse. Next was Ben, my COO, the kid who started with me in that dusty, cramped room and who now ran the entire operational side of a multi-million-dollar enterprise. I was including a life-changing bonus for him and a few other key employees in the sale. Their loyalty would be rewarded in a way they could never imagine. Then I went back, way back. I tracked down Mrs. Lopez, the sweet, elderly woman who owned the bakery that had been my very first client. She was in her 80s now, retired and living in Florida. I booked her a first-class ticket and a suite at the hotel. Her small act of faith in me 30 years ago had been one of the first bricks in my empire. She deserved to see the finished palace. I invited my first employees, my most loyal clients, my accountant who had helped me navigate those terrifying early loans, my lawyer who had protected me. Every name on that list was a person who had contributed a thread to the tapestry of my success. The list grew to over 200 names, and as I reviewed it, a cold, satisfying certainty washed over me. There were two names that were conspicuously, intentionally absent: Sophie and Michael. They had no idea this was happening. To them, I was just Mom, the ever-present, ever-providing background character in their lives. They had no concept of the magnitude of what I had built, or what was about to happen. The invitations went out. Thick, cream-colored cardstock, printed, of course, with the highest quality ink from my own presses. The embossed logo of Carter Print Solutions gleamed in gold at the top. It was an invitation to celebrate a legacy. The date was set. The contracts were ready. My dress, a stunning, custom-made gown in a deep emerald green that screamed power and elegance, was hanging in my closet. A week before the event, I was sitting in my office, looking at the final guest list when my phone buzzed. It was a picture message from Sophie, a sonogram. Underneath it, the caption, "Thought you'd want to know. You're going to be a grandma." For a single, terrifying moment, my resolve wavered. A grandchild, a chance to start over, a new life. The old Laura, the one who would do anything for her children, cried out from her grave. But then I looked closer at the text. "Thought you'd want to know." Not, "I'm so excited to share this with you." Not, "I can't wait for you to be a part of this baby's life." It was an announcement, not an invitation. It was a piece of information she was dispensing, perhaps as an olive branch, perhaps as another strategic move. I thought about what it would mean. Would I be allowed to babysit but not attend the christening? Would I be invited to the first birthday party only if David wasn't coming? Would I forever be the second-tier family, the one that had to be scheduled around the real family? I stared at the sonogram, at that tiny, blurry shape. and I felt a pang of sadness for the relationship we would never have. But I did not feel regret for the path I was on. This wasn't about punishing them anymore. It was about liberating myself. I put my phone down, the message unanswered. The stage was set. The final act of my old life was about to begin, and I was the only one who knew the ending. Part 4. The execution and the fallout. The night of the gala felt like a dream. As I stepped out of the car and onto the red carpet leading into the St. Regis, the city air was crisp and cool. I paused for a moment, looking up at the Grand Hotel, its windows blazing with golden light. This wasn't just a party, it was a coronation. My own. Walking into the ballroom, I had to stop and catch my breath. The event planner had outdone herself. The chandeliers cast a warm, glittering glow over everything. A string quartet was playing softly in the corner. Waiters moved silently through the crowd with trays of champagne and exquisite hors d'oeuvres. The room was filled with the gentle hum of conversation and laughter. But it was the faces that truly took my breath away. Everywhere I looked, I saw a piece of my history. There was Maria, tears already welling in her eyes, looking absolutely stunning in a sequin dress. There was Ben, looking sharp in a tuxedo, chatting animatedly with executives from Viridian Capital. And there, sitting at a place of honor near the front, was Mrs. Lopez, her wrinkled face alight with a look of pure, unadulterated pride. I walked over to her first. She grasped my hands, her own as soft as worn leather. "Laura, my dear," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I remember you in that little shop. Ink stains on your fingers. Look at you now. Look at what you've built." "We built it, Mrs. Lopez," I said, squeezing her hands. "You were the first. The evening was a beautiful blur of heartfelt conversations and joyful reunions. These were my people, my real family, the ones who had been in the trenches with me. As I moved through the room, I shared stories, laughed until my sides hurt, and accepted hugs that were filled with genuine warmth and affection. There was no tension here, no drama, no walking on eggshells. There was only love and mutual respect. Around 10 p.m., Ben tapped a glass for silence. It was time for the speeches. He went first, his voice shaking slightly as he spoke about our journey, from the clanking old Bessie press to the state-of-the-art facility we now commanded. He called me a mentor, a leader, and a friend. When he was finished, the entire room was on its feet, applauding. Then, Eleanor Vance from Viridian Capital took the stage. She spoke eloquently about the value of Carter Print Solutions, not just as a business, but as a pillar of the community, a testament to the power of perseverance. And then she announced the acquisition. A collective gasp went through the room, followed by another thunderous ovation. Finally, it was my turn. I walked to the podium, my emerald dress shimmering under the lights. I looked out at the sea of friendly, supportive faces. My family. "Thank you all for being here," I began, my voice clear and steady. "Tonight is called a celebration of a legacy. And for a long time, I thought a legacy was something you pass down, something you leave behind for your children. But I've come to realize that's not quite right." I paused, letting the words hang in the air. A legacy isn't what you leave for people. It's what you leave inside people. It's the loyalty you inspire. It's the opportunities you create. It's the respect you earn and the respect you give. Every single person in this room tonight is a part of my legacy. You are the people who propped me up, who believed in me, who worked alongside me. You were there, and for that I am eternally grateful. I raised my glass. This is not an ending. This is a new beginning. To my real family, to us. The room erupted. "To Laura," they cheered. "To Carter Print Solutions." After the speeches, a large table was brought to the center of the stage. On it were the final stacks of documents. The press, who had been invited for the announcement, surged forward, their cameras flashing. Eleanor sat on one side, and I sat on the other. She slid the final contract in front of me. It was thick, heavy with the weight of my past and the promise of my future. I picked up the pen. It was a beautiful, weighty fountain pen, a gift from Ben. As I uncapped it, I felt a profound sense of peace settle over me. This was it, the final stroke. I looked up one last time, my eyes scanning the room, my heart full. Then I looked down and signed my name. Laura Carter. The ink was black, permanent, and decisive. The flashbulbs were blinding. The applause was deafening. I shook hands with the Viridian executives. I hugged Eleanor, and for the first time in years, I felt completely, utterly free. The rest of the night was a celebration of that freedom. I woke up the next morning in my hotel suite to the gentle rays of the sun streaming through the windows. For the first time in decades, I had nothing to do. No orders to check, no payroll to approve, no fires to put out. There was just a beautiful, quiet, and expansive future ahead of me. I picked up my phone to check the time, and that's when I saw it. The deluge. 37 missed calls. 52 text messages. They were all from Sophie and Michael. My heart began to beat a little faster, a drumbeat of anticipation. I opened the message thread, my thumb scrolling up to the very beginning. The first texts had come in around midnight, clearly after seeing the news online. Sophie, Mom, what is this? The news is saying Carter Print Solutions was sold? Is this a joke? Michael, just saw an article. Call me. We need to talk about this. Then, as the hours passed with no response from me, the tone began to shift from confusion to panic and then to outrage. Sophie, you sold the family company. Without even telling us. We had a right to know. Michael, this is unbelievable. That was our legacy, our future. You had no right to do that without consulting us. Sophie, and you threw a party. A huge gala? We saw the pictures online. How could you not invite your own children? What is wrong with you? Michael, I can't believe this. After everything Dad did to try and keep us connected to you, you pull a stunt like this. He is just as shocked as we are. That last one, the invocation of their father, the peacekeeper, was the most galling of all. I could almost hear his manipulative words pouring through Michael's fingers. The texts kept coming, a torrent of entitlement and manufactured victimhood. They accused me of being selfish, of being cruel, of betraying them. They demanded to know about the money. They demanded an explanation. I stared at the phone for a long, long time. I thought about typing out a long, scathing reply, detailing every sacrifice, every lonely night, every betrayal they had dealt me. I thought about listing every dollar I had spent on them, every opportunity one had given them. But I realized it would be a waste of breath. They didn't want to understand. They just wanted what they thought was theirs. So, I took a deep breath, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. I thought about their weddings, the joy on their faces in the photos I was never meant to see, the celebrations I was deliberately, painfully excluded from. Then I typed back one single message, sent to both of them in a group chat. It was short, sharp, and final. You didn't invite me to your weddings. I didn't invite you to my victory. I hit send. Then I blocked their numbers. The silence that followed was the most profound peace I have ever known. It wasn't the silence of an empty house, but the silence of a closed door. A chapter, finally and completely finished. Of course, there was fallout. They tried to come after me legally, claiming they were entitled to a piece of the company as my children. Their father, no doubt, funded their lawyers. But my own legal team, the best in the state, politely and efficiently informed them that a company I started as a sole proprietor, long after their father was gone, was mine and mine alone to sell. There was no case. They were laughed out of the office. They tried to smear me publicly, feeding their sob story to a local gossip blogger, but it backfired spectacularly. My employees, my friends, even old clients rallied around me. They flooded the comments section with stories of my loyalty, my generosity, my integrity. The narrative quickly shifted from cruel mother robs children to ungrateful children try to steal from self-made mother. They had forgotten that while they were off building a life with their father, I had been in the community, building a reputation. The last I heard, David's money, which had always seemed so endless to them, began to dry up when faced with real legal bills and a lifestyle he couldn't actually sustain. The perfect family he had constructed for them began to show its cracks. Funny how that happens when the ATM stops dispensing cash. As for me, I found that the money was the least interesting part of my newfound freedom. It's a tool, nothing more. It allows me to travel, to donate to causes I care about, to help the people who helped me. I set up a foundation that gives grants to single mothers trying to start their own businesses. That's my legacy now. Sometimes, late at night, I think about that sonogram. I think about the grandchild I may never know. And there's a flicker of sadness there, a ghost of what might have been. But it's not a consuming fire. It's just a quiet acknowledgement of a path not taken. Because I finally understand. I spent decades defining myself by my role as their mother. I thought my value was tied to my sacrifices for them, but they taught me a brutal and ultimately invaluable lesson. My worth isn't determined by who I am to other people. It's determined by who I am to myself. I am a survivor. I am a builder. I am a loyal friend. And I am a woman who, when faced with erasure, chose to write her own triumphant final chapter. The revenge wasn't the party. It wasn't even the money. The revenge was my peace. The revenge was looking in the mirror and finally, fully seeing myself again. And she is magnificent. Thank you for listening to this journey. It's a stark reminder that sometimes the most important boundaries we set are with the people we're taught we shouldn't have to. Family isn't always about blood. It's about loyalty, respect, and showing up. If you've ever had to redefine what family means to you, let us know in the comments below. Your story matters. And if you found strength in this one, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you won't miss another story of justice served. Until next time, be good to yourselves and be even better to those who have earned it.